Hey, nonprofit visionaries. I'm Shalita, the Nonprofitista O'Neill, and my mission is to help community organizers and business owners to launch and revitalize nonprofits that will help rebuild their communities. We are back for another hashtag nonprofit no filter live discussion. And today we're going to be talking about nonprofit fundraising strategies in the midst of COVID-19. So we have our special guest who will be joining us shortly, Burgundy Allison, who is the program associate at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. So I hope you have your questions ready, okay? Because I've gotten this a lot from clients and even just from people that have tuned in on YouTube and have questions. It's always about fundraising. And y'all know that if we don't have funds to do our work or into our programming or services, then we really can't, we can't rebuild our communities the way that we want. So while we wait on Burgundy to join us, I just wanted to say a few things myself, because y'all know I'm not new to this fundraising game, not at all. This is something actually I really enjoy doing, because true fundraising is really all about relationship development, and you have to be authentic, right? You really have to be authentic, but you have to be clear about what you do. So I've talked to so many people who will say, oh, I hired a grant writer, or they just got started. Maybe they're 2 years old or 1 year old. And they're like, I'm going to hire somebody to write a federal grant for me, or I'm going to hire a grant writer to start getting funds for me. And they're brand new, less than 3 years old. And that's a setup, y'all. It's a setup. Because if you are just, a lot of times with funders, they're not looking at you before you are 3 years old. Okay, you have to have some seed dollars, and you have to build up some sort of history of not only getting funding, but doing the work. And so if you haven't thought about, well, what is my nonprofit strategic plan going to be? Like, how am I actually going to deliver what I said that I'm going to deliver? And then y'all know, it's your mission, your vision, your goals, like all of that is super, super important before, you start saying, well, I want some money. When people ask you, well, what's your budget? And you're like, I don't even know what my budget is. You need to know these things. You need to know how much you're trying to raise. You need to also be able to talk to different audiences, right? Because different types of funders hear different. They listen different. So the way that you approach them and what you say to them, right, is going to need to be different. So that's why I brought Burgundy Allison from the Annie E. Casey Foundation on to speak with you. And she is with us. Hold on. Let me add her on in.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, gorgeous?
I am good. You were giving great advice, like you didn't even need me. Like,
no, ma'am. Oh, no, ma'am. We need you. Okay. We need you. And look, Burgundy, and I'm going to let Burgundy tell you more about who she is, but she's been on both sides of the coin. So she's been, we go way back. We in the trenches, okay? In the trenches at Baltimore City, providing resources and to different populations. So she knows what it's like to have to raise funds to do the work. And she also knows what it's like now to then look at, okay, well, how am I going to give out funding? So she's coming from, sometimes those perspectives merge and sometimes they diverge. And so I really want y'all to hear from Burgundy today. So Burgundy, welcome. Tell us more about you. Tell us about before you became the funder. Like, what does that look like?
Wow. So before I became the funder, I worked for quite a few, not quite a few. I'm lying when I say quite a few. It seems like quite a few because it was a long time. But I worked for two main nonprofits for pretty lengthy amounts of time. And I guess you would consider them kind of mid to larger size nonprofits, where I was directing programs specifically for young people. One was specific to young people who were experiencing homelessness. And then another was a program that was geared towards reconnecting young people who had disengaged from work and school, making sure that they had everything that they needed to be successful. Right. And in the midst of all of that, I also founded my own nonprofit. And so, I've had all of the experiences and now being a funder. So my perspective is pretty wide, I think, in terms of what it's like in a philanthropic space to be on either side of the fence, even when it's being the owner and the leader of the organization, when it's just being the practitioner and part of a larger organization, and now as a grant maker myself.
Yes. Look. Okay. So tell us about the grant making part. What really goes into, especially at a large organization, right? What are funders looking for? How can people best prepare themselves?
So that is an interesting question because no one funder is like another.
Yeah.
Very much to what you were speaking to before I joined. You really have to know who you're talking to. You have to know both the person and the organization that they're representing, right? So I think what a lot of people miss is that the way things move in a funding space has a lot to do with your relationship. And so you're really getting an opportunity to establish a relationship if you don't already have one, or to continue nurturing one. And sometimes that can be a pretty long song and dance. It's like a wine and a dime, right? So you're going to be schmoozing and you're going to be rubbing elbows and you're going to be having coffee and lunch with a funder, sometimes for a good amount of time, where dollars are even talked about, right? So you really have to know who's funding what. So you want to know which philanthropy does what, who's focusing on the arts, if that's your thing, who's focusing on entrepreneurship, who's focusing on civic issues. Like, you've got to be able to target your pitch to whom it is you want to talk to. When you figure out, okay, Annie Casey funds me, I fall within their funding area, right? Then you want to know who it is that you need to talk to. So like Casey's website, it lists all of our, we're called associates. So in other foundations, they're called program officers. We're called associates. So there's a listing of who everyone is across the foundation, what their areas of expertise are. So you actually can target exactly who it is that you want to speak to. I mean, once you do that, do some homework, find out who that person is, what their areas of expertise are. And so when you're having a conversation, you're not just talking about the fact that you're interested in establishing a relationship with your organization. You're actually interested in establishing a relationship with that particular program association. And the reason you want to do that is we're not just bound by dollars. So most of us have areas of expertise that we can be of technical assistance to you in. And so you want to also tap into that, because the dollars will end, right? We're not going to fund you forever, but the relationship is sustainable, and you can always draw from our wisdom, our knowledge, our experiences, and our other connections and relationships to move your organization forward. And so you really want to be specific about who you're talking to and what you're talking about.
And another thing too is funders talk to each other.
Yes.
So, when I'm always talking about collaborations and, making sure that you do the work, as far as who's been around before, because, a lot of nonprofits or, new nonprofits will come on the scene and be like, hey, I'm here. I want to apply this money. And, and everybody else is like, well, hold up. We've been here doing this work for a minute.
Yeah.
And so you apply to a certain funder, and that funder, if they don't know you, they're going to ask around, or their grantees that they do fund, right? I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
I mean, we're going to do our due diligence, right? So we're not going to put money into a space that we're not sure of. In the same way that you should be doing some work around who it is you're talking to, we're going to do the same. And so you want to understand that too, right? So there's politics in everything, and there's politics in a philanthropic space, and you want to be aware of that. I would also say, when you are engaging with someone in this space, you want to also be careful not to downplay who you perceive to be as your competitors, because you don't know who I'm funding. And so there are lots of times when people are coming to me and it's our first kind of rodeo, and the thing that they do is put down somebody that I'm funding. And, that's their pitch. Their pitch is, well, they've been doing this for this long and their results aren't this, and blah, 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 blah. And you don't know the relationship that I have with the organization and the people associated with that organization that you're talking about. And not only that, there is a value in collaboration. And so if you're bashing people who are doing similar work to yours, or anyone for that matter that is of the business of genuinely moving Baltimore City forward, then what you're also saying to me is that you are not an appropriate collaborator. Like, you are somebody that I could put with somebody else to have a greater impact.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, understanding that dollars are finite, right? People like to hold their cards close to their chest, but don't do this.
It's just like,
because you don't know who you're sitting in front of and what those relationships look like. And that happens a lot, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And it happens a lot in first time meetings. And so just want to kind of elevate that.
Well, let's talk more about collaborations. Like, what does that look like? I know I talk about it a lot, and I know everybody is not appropriate for collaboration. Like, you don't want to collaborate with everybody, but what do funders want to see as it pertains to collaborations, and what are some examples of collaborations that folks can?
Collaboration, I think where people kind of have a misconception about collaboration is they always assume that it has to be about the sharing of dollars, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be. It can be sharing of resources. It can be thought partnership. It can be the fact that you have a consistent network of providers that you convene to share information and to learn new skills. That's really the heart of collaboration, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that you're bringing someone in and you're going to split funds or you're going to subcontract. It could really, really be that you are thinking on how to have deeper and greater impact on the city by bringing people together. For instance, we are a convener. We convene our partners all the time. And so it's always good to see that you do the same, that you're convening partners to really take a look at a particular issue from varying perspectives and vantage points to come up with what's going to be the most collaborative effort to overcome a specific obstacle. And so I think people need to be more creative, right? I know that, again, dollars are finite, competition is a real thing, but if you can get over the competition, right, and look at having real impact, then what you'll do is you'll come together, like minds will come together, and the power in that type of a circle is greater than even sharing the dollars, right? Because you got to be able to think outside of the limits of your finances in order to really, really have impact. And so sometimes bringing people to the table and having thought partnership helps to do that. So collaboration looks like all kinds of stuff. Absolutely, I think the greatest example that I could say is convening your partners and perceived competitors to kind of think through how it is that we can come together. There's lots of duplication of efforts, right? So there's lots of mentoring programs. There's lots of people who do case management. But when you can assemble those people, right, and you're choosing a piece of the pie that everyone does extremely well. So you're the best at case management, and you're the best at GED, and you're the best at mental health. If we can pool our resources together, then between the three of us, we have the best place for a young person who has disengaged from school to walk in and get the best case manager, the best GED, and the best mental health. But it's going to come from three different resources. That's collaboration. And the impact on the young people that are being served is greater than if I do it all myself, or even if someone gave us all dollars and we were all still duplicating those same services, right? Because then you got one young person that's expected to go three different places, three different things, when we could all just come together and do that because we thought outside of the financial limitations, outside of the competitiveness of the field, and thought, what if we came together to do the best thing in the best way for the young people that we seek to serve? So I think, pool and power is the best.
Pool and power, hold up, hashtag pooling power, y'all. I like that.
Pool and power, because I think, philanthropy is really viewed as a very powerful space, right? And I think even on the ground, the perception of power of philanthropy is misaligned. And I think that on the ground, grassroots organizations in particular have to be reminded and remind themselves of the power that they hold. You hold power in your community. You hold power with your consumers, right? And then the people that you've identified as most likely to need the services that you're providing. Once you're reminded of your power, if you could be reminded that if you pool it, it's even greater, then collaboration comes easier, and it's easier to digest, and then it's easier to facilitate, and then it's much deeper than the way that we move now.
Yes, and you said a couple of things that I just kind of want to rewind. because that is, if you can see my computer screen, that's my backdrop, like the word impact.
Yes.
On it. Explain to us, what is impact? Because a lot of nonprofits will start up, and they do the paperwork, and it's like, all right, I did my paperwork. All right, I want to do this tutoring service, but they're not looking further ahead at, what kind of impact are they going to have in the community. So can you talk more about what is impact? What does it look like?
So impact really looks like how you're affecting the population, the area that you've intended, right? And it can look a lot of different ways. Impact is another idea, another terminology, another thing that I think gets lost in the sauce, because there are things that your funders are looking for, and each funder measure that impact in a different way. And then there's what you know to be true about what you do, right? So I always encourage nonprofits to determine your impact for yourself, and then figure out how to translate that into what your funder is asking for, right? Because you've got to also stay true to what it is that you say you do. There's integrity in your mission. There's integrity in how you carry out your service. That is your impact. Then we will ask you, we want to see this, and this. Then you figure out how to translate that. And that's almost like learning another language. I always tell people it's like, it's very much like being bilingual. Like, you've got to learn how to translate impact into numbers as well as a narrative, right? But you determine what your impact really is, because you know it best. Your funder is not on the ground with you. Your funder usually is very far removed from the communities that you're working with, and the issues that you are up against in trying to deliver the services that you say that you do. And so it is really on you to stay true to who you are, what you said you were going to do, and then learn the language to translate that into measurable outcomes that we can then see as impact. But you already know what that is. And so I would really, really encourage for organizations, startups especially, to not allow somebody to tell you what your impact is. You determine that. And you determined it when you decided to get in the game, right? Because you knew that there was some value that you could bring that didn't already exist. So that's your impact. So once you learn the language of your funder, and it's going to be different for each one. So you might have to learn 7 different languages.
You'll be bilingual, more than 2.
Right. You're going to speak a lot of ease, right? Because you've got to learn how to answer the questions that they're asking so that you can maintain your funding. But it starts with you being able to identify and define your impact for yourself.
Absolutely. And I like what you said too around when folks, that confidence, right? Knowing that the funder, it's a partnership, because a lot of people will be like, well, can I even reach out to her to ask her about, if I can meet with her, or maybe, they feel like they're doing something wrong by reaching out and wanting to develop some sort of partnership, because they don't know that what they're bringing to the table is super important. Like, everybody has their role. It's a partnership with the funder. The funder wants to be able to do certain things in the community that they're unable to do. So you come into the table, knowing what, like you said, Burgundy, like the impact that you want to have on your niche in the community, good and well that what you have can help support them. Then that's the kind of confidence that you bring to your, bring to the relationship, right? Instead of thinking, oh, well, I don't, don't be like, power.
Right. Tap into your power and your own expertise. Not for nothing, systems have done a job on us as a people, and those of us who stay low to the ground. Like, there are whole systems in place to keep us where we are. But even when you make a decision to stay in those positions, systems have still done a job on kind of disallowing you to own your expertise, right? And so I say, when you come in the room, know that, yes, you are the expert, right? And there are things that you may need to learn to communicate more effectively with a funder, but you know. And if you know that, then it makes it easier then to learn what you need to do to be able to communicate more effectively.
That's right. Y'all listening? I hope you got your pen and pad right now, because I don't want to hear you talking about, well, how do I fundraise? And what do I do? I'm going to hire me a grant writer and write me a federal. Let's talk about that though, because you've applied for and written federal grants and gotten awarded federal grants. Like that's people don't believe me. They don't believe when I say what it is. Can you tell us what goes into the federal grant writing process and when are people typically ready for that type of proposal?
Federal grants are juicy, right? But I always say to people, you have to, one, this is a collaborative opportunity too. If you can find someone who's done it, then they can help walk you through it. I always say too, it doesn't hurt to do it just to get in the kind of rhythm of doing it and experience, right? But I will be honest, as a grant maker, I'm not a grant lover. And when I was working with nonprofits, I really, really hated that part of like the writing of the grants. And it's a lot. It is a lot. I will say practice as much as possible. And definitely collaborate with people who've done it and who have done it successfully. When you have an opportunity, follow up with the program officer to find out why you weren't funded and what they can give you. Not all make themselves available to do that, but when that opportunity makes itself available, I would say absolutely take it, because they're going to give you the what from that side of things, right? There is a skill to it. Like there is a way to do it. It's why people hire themselves out to do it, because it can be very formulaic. And once you get into the groove of it, then you learn it and then you can do it. My one of my former EDs, her mantra was, the more money you get, the more money you get. And so she was constantly writing grants, constantly. I think it kept her mentally, on her toes to keep doing it. But it also kept her in the loop. And so we were constantly getting money because she was always getting money. So you do have to get in the groove of a thing. And there is a formula to it. But again, that's federal. Every funder works very, very differently. So there are some funders where you don't have to do a whole proposal, where it's a more simple process, where it's just a simple scope of work that they need. Those tend to be funders who don't do open invitations for funding. Someone who kind of finds you and taps you on the shoulder and says, come, and it's a lot easier that way. And that goes back to the relationship building. You want to always be looking. You want to always be finding out who gives what. You want to know what their funding cycles are, when that money is coming out. It's really hard when I meet people and I want to be able to fund them, but my money is gone. They're catching me at the wrong time, and then they gotta wait. But even then, it opens up an opportunity to stay in touch. So then now I'm on your email blast, and you're inviting me to events, and now I have even more intimate knowledge of what you do, and so that I'm even more sure that when I go into creating my next budget to include you. So I would say it's a formula to it, especially with federal grants, and get some practice.
And even become a federal or a federal grant reviewer too. So that you can see on that side, what they're looking for.
Sometimes different city agencies do the same thing, but they'll have calls for reviewers. Whenever there's an opportunity to review a proposal, take it. You'll get to be on that side of things. You'll get to look at how things are scored, and you'll get to see like bad versus good. You'll get to see bare minimum versus like your overachievers. Like you'll get to see how people construct budgets, and you'll get to see really kind of the breadth of what goes into a good proposal, right? I think a lot of people don't realize how subjective a lot of this is, right? And so different funders are looking for different things, and so any opportunity to be on this side of the table, absolutely take it.
And that could be, like you just said, Burgundy, joining committee, right? Because I tell folks too, as part of, people like, well, I want to know about I want the money. The relationship building piece is super important. And you won't know about grant reviewing opportunities if you're not collaborating with somebody, in the community or different funders will have committees that they create themselves, like an education committee, depending on what they, like you said, convenings. They will have convenings and invite stakeholders and invite, potential grantees. You don't come there asking nobody for money. Don't do that. Like, you definitely you come there to be a part of the process and to be of contribution. Right. And then naturally, as people, you kind of align and see where, where the relationship goes, then maybe later on. But those are opportunities to.
And I would say, because you started with, I be telling them, and they don't listen. Listen, like, you don't, federal grants, you don't necessarily get a lot of people who successfully get them outside of very large organizations.
Right.
If you have someone that's tangled with a federal grant and they are giving you some knowledge about it, take it. Because even if it wasn't successful, the process, like, I think people are always looking at end game and they always leave out process. And you always want process. But when you're talking with someone, you want to be listening to their experience in the process, because whatever it was that went well or not, it happened in the process. It wasn't at whether or not they received the funding. It was actually the process that made that determination. And so listen. Absolutely listen.
And then follow the funds, right? So if there's someone in the community who has gotten, like Burgundy said, has gotten a federal grant, there might be an opportunity for you to be a subcontractor with them, right? So maybe they said that they would, provide different types of services, and maybe, they ain't identified who they want to do a certain piece, or, maybe the initial organization they wrote into the grant, it didn't work out. And so they need another service provider. So you need to also be on the lookout for that money.
Yeah.
Who can I reach out to and connect with and see if there's an opportunity there to be a subcontractor?
Yes.
Federal grants, that's like all the states.
All of it, right? And so I would just say, like, to your point about following the money and being in those rooms, over the years, I've seen you in all the rooms, right? And so that is important. You know what I mean? Like, those relationships follow you one to the next, right? And so when you are able to translate even an unsuccessful bid for something into a relationship, it puts you in position for something else when you're ready, when you are more prepared. And so don't take it lightly when we're talking about relationships. Like, the relationships are key, and they come back to you at the most pivotal points in your career and in the development of your organization.
Absolutely. It took me, I know when I got my first federal grant, it took me like 3 or 4 years of applying and it wasn't like it was a state administered federal grant. But even still, that process, and it wasn't just about me, it was 4 or 5 other organizations that I was collaborating with, providing, like Burgundy said, providing different pieces of it. And then also of me being active on the committees that they have, because it's about building trust, y'all. And this is within a relationship, somebody that walk up to you and just be like, hey, let me hold $5,000. And you don't know that person. And you're like, oh, hold up. Well, I don't know about you. I don't, you have to build up the trust. And like Burgundy said, sometimes situations may seem like it's a loss or that, you didn't get the funding, but it's all about the relationship building, and you keep trying. So Burgundy, tell us about board members, because one of the biggest things is, I also tell folks that initially when you first starting out, of course, you're not going to be ready for a, $50,000, $100,000 grant initially, but you still need to run your program. So what role does your board members play, or should they play in that? And how the funders looking at that?
So when I started my nonprofit, I had 2 partners. And we created our board with the obligation that they had to either raise or donate themselves a certain amount of money every year, which included us, right? And so it is important to recognize that level of responsibility of a board. I come across a lot of organizations that have boards and there is no fundraising obligation of their board members. And I think it's just lack of knowledge and understanding that's it. Like I'm not just asking you to be on my board for the sake of my filing, right? I'm asking you to be on my board to help me put this thing together and get it off the ground. And that is going to require money. And so I would offer that if you are putting together an organization, or if you have an organization and your board does not have a fundraising requirement, you should probably begin discussing what that would look like. And if you're putting together your organization, that should absolutely be part of it, right? Because that's a real thing. I think in terms of your board and its activity, again, that is going to depend on the funder. But what I will say is, as you create relationships with funders and with individuals at philanthropic organizations, you want to begin to think about how you can use those individuals in certain ways, including as board members. So there are lots and lots of people in philanthropy, grant makers that serve on boards, right? I know there is a level of permission that has to be given in some cases so that we can serve on boards, but it's a part of our job, right? It's part of what we do. And so again, your relationship with your funder isn't limited to them issuing your grant. One of the ways that they can support is in as a board member, if it is allowed, depending on the foundation. And so your board is important. You want a working board. I think more often than not, I come across organizations, especially small ones, when their boards don't work. Your board needs to be working. They need to be helping with the overall health and infrastructure of your organization. And if that is not true, then you probably need to be rethinking who it is that you have on your board and how it is even that you use your board, because your board should be like your board of advisors. That's who you go to help problem solve. That's who you go to help flesh out your vision for the organization. That's who you're going to go to when you need certain resources. There should be profiles of the different types of people that you want sitting on your board. And that should depend on the type of organization that you want and your vision for how it grows. But you should be very intentional, and there should be a good amount of work put into who it is that you assemble as your board and how it is that you expect that board to show up.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes back to about our personal relationship and thoughts and belief systems about money.
Yeah.
Right. Because we can't ask other people for money. If we feel like, oh, I can't, the board members are supposed to be the people that are advocating for your organization. And if they themselves haven't given to your organization, how can they ask other people to come out of their pockets to give to your organization? And so, don't be afraid of coming from a lack mindset that, people don't have it. No, people have money for what they prioritize and for what they want to support. Yeah. So, make sure that way you're thinking is because if you're thinking that way with your board and you don't want to ask your board for money, then you're going to be real timid about how or what you expect or what you ask from funders. Yeah. And a lot of funders is like, ask for what you need. Don't be like, maybe they don't got this, or 15,000 is too much. Let me tell you, yes.
I get that a lot. I thought that was too much. And I'm like, ask for what you want. Let me cut you. Don't cut yourself. Absolutely. I'm so glad that you talked about that lack mindset, because when it comes to nonprofits, there is a poverty mindset that people who run nonprofits have. And I think it is because when you think nonprofit, you think heart, you think passion, you think about nonprofit kind of filling the gaps, right? What we don't think about is the fact that a nonprofit is a business. And the bottom line of any business is always money. And so you can't fill the gap if you don't have the money to facilitate the need, right? And so I really want us to pull away from that lack mentality when it comes to nonprofits, and understand that at the end of the day, what you're doing, the time it takes to do it, there's a dollar amount that can be assigned to that, right? And either you're going to be assembling a board that can help you fund this vision and connect you in other spaces where you will have access to funds for that vision, or you're going to create some stream of revenue that your nonprofit can be creating so that it can sustain itself. but you always have to be thinking about money. And if you're not the money person, if you're the heart person, you need to bring on board a money person.
Yeah.
Paying attention to the money while you are out here pouring out your heart.
Mm-hmm. Y'all listening now? Because a lot of people ask these questions. They're ready for funding, but they would think they're ready for funding, but you're not ready for funding. And let's even talk about financial statements. How are you keeping your financial internal processes? If somebody asked you for a financial report on what you've spent money on for the nonprofit, can you provide it? How important is that? Like, when funders are looking or asking for your financial statements, how important is that, Burgundy?
So again, goes funder by funder. So there are some funders that will ask for a multi-years of your what's it called?
The financial audit. Oh, the audit.
Mm-hmm. Multi-year audits. Some will ask for within that audit will come with like a statement of the health of the organization, and so that's a thing. Some are going to ask for your financial statements. They're going to ask. Some will ask for your 990. And so you've got to be taking care of the business. One of the things that I talk about is the fact that organizations need to make themselves fundable. And so you'll hear that there's a lack of access to funding, but if I give you access to the funds, is your infrastructure fundable? Right? That's a serious question. Because one of the things that gets talked about is whether or not smaller organizations can handle funding. Right? With your infrastructural and processes in place where you can handle the funds. And again, it comes because, we come from the heart. You don't get into doing nonprofit work for funding or for dollar amounts, unless you can do fee for service, because there are some fee for service that they make it a pretty penny.
Oh yeah.
Right? But if there's not a fee for service aspect of what you do, you've gotten into the work because you love it. Like there's a passion of yours. There's some obligation that you feel to your community, right? And that is fine. But if you can't couple your heart with a business acumen, then your organization will not be able to survive. Right? If you're so focused on the passion of what you do and you're not focused on the business side of things, I can't fund you. No funder will. And so you really have to be paying close attention to how your organization is being run. That's another responsibility of your board. Your board is holding you accountable for the processes, the internal processes, and the overall health of that organization. And so again, this is why you need a working board, because there's a level of accountability that should be in place to make sure that all those things are happening.
Absolutely. Now you touched on fee for service, because one thing I do believe in is that it's not even just about COVID-19, right? Yeah, COVID-19 is a whole bunch of strains. COVID-19, it's not just about COVID. There's always going to be something that's going to pop up, in the nonprofit funding landscape. You could have a funder that just decides they want to fund something different, or they're no longer focusing on homelessness. They're focusing on something different now. So, as a nonprofit fundraiser, you always have to be ready for, those types of shifts. So can you tell us more about, you said fee for service or other types of revenue streams that people should be thinking about?
So when I founded my nonprofit, it was because, again, I never liked writing grants. And I understood that writing grants is like a never ending process. You're always writing other grants, right? Because you know that there's an end to this one. So I did fee for service because then I know where my money's coming from. I can, to a certain extent, control those amounts. Whatever grant funding came in would be supplementary, complementary to what my organization was making, right? I think that a lot of people aren't aware that nonprofits can make money, right? A lot of people don't understand.
Susan B. Coleman. Let's just look at some of the larger nonprofits out here now.
And so you've got to figure out how your organization can create streams of revenue for itself. So, for instance, we did mentoring. And so we became a vendor with an agency, and for each hour we were charging. And that's what kept us afloat, right? I didn't have to wait on a grant. We were making money. And that was the design. The design was that we would have our own stream of income. So when you think about, there are lots of mental health organizations, PRPs, those nonprofits make a lot of money because they're billing for the services that they provide, right? There are also organizations that have like wholly owned subsidiaries that are for profit. And those profits are then funneled back into the nonprofit. So there are different ways that you can make money and not be totally reliant on grants. But you got to get out and figure out how to do those things and how to make sure everything is legal and it's all above board. But it absolutely can be done. And I encourage people all the time to do it. Like, don't rely on grants because as you said, Shalita, we change our minds. You know, philanthropy will focus on one thing and then we will pivot and we'll focus on another. And if your mission is no longer aligned with our priorities, then we will sunset those investments, right? And it's just the way things go. And so you've got to be prepared to be able to weather those types of storms and changes in season. And so one of the ways to really do that is to figure out how to create a stream of revenue for your organization. And there are ways you would be surprised of the things that people get paid to do in nonprofits. I always tell people, go on Medicaid and look at everything that they pay for. Medicaid pays for lots and lots of things that happen in community, like Medicaid pays for, right? And if you don't know that, you don't know. And again, this is where your relationships come handy. You got to start talking to people about how it is that they're doing what they do and figuring out how some of those things can work for you and figuring out how it is that you could create money for your nonprofit so that you are not reliant on the decisions that a larger foundation is making in terms of what they will or will not fund.
Absolutely. And even contracts too. So you can have contracts with the state, you know, if you are a mentoring organization or organization that works, you know, everything I give reference to foster care because that's like my whole thing. You know,
school systems. If you have programming for young people, kids, school-age kids, school systems hand out those types of contracts. And you have to also be creative, right? Because we have COVID now, we're doing virtual learning. Are you doing something that's easily translated virtually? Because there's going to be many, many organizations that are going to be looking for people to help them facilitate their programming very differently than what they're used to. So what is it that you do? This is one of those opportunities for you to be confident in what it is that you do that's not like somebody else, or being able to translate what you do into a new virtual stratosphere. So you can be creative now. I would say if I had a nonprofit now, I would probably be getting real creative about how it is I'm doing things, because you got to read the board, right? We've been in COVID now, it's almost 6 months. So if you've been having to make changes internally, then you should start thinking about how could you provide technical assistance to another organization to make these same types of transitions, or what is the service that you could provide that you've now gotten really good at in this time of COVID that somebody's going to pay you for, right? Like now is the time for you to kind of lean into your own strengths, your own levels of creativity, lean into it and put a dollar amount on it.
There you go. And add tax. Because people too who have their sell merchandise. So it could be t-shirts or create. Yeah, people will buy those things. We like trinkets, you know, and especially if cool ones. So I'm gonna open it up to I'm gonna ask, because we got a number of folks that have chimed in and just want to say a couple things, and I'm gonna do that. But before I do that, I want to ask about reporting. Right. So let's say folks, they got the funding, and some people feel like, oh, I got the funding. Okay, that's it. I ain't got to do nothing else. You know, I can, when the funder asks me or email me, I can respond when I feel like it. And like, what are the expectations around reporting once they actually get the funding?
So I think one suggestion, piece of wisdom that I would offer, that's a question you should know the answer to when you are going after the funding. What you don't want to do is get the funding and then find out on the back end, Like that was a lot, right?
Right.
Now you are engaging with your officer. You want to know like what is going to be the funding requirement. And the reporting requirement. The other thing is, I think that what we don't do often enough is take ownership of our own data, right? So there's what your funder is going to ask for, but you should always be crafting a narrative internally as well. Because what happens a lot is a lot of organizations, smaller organizations in particular, will only mine the data that the funder is requesting, which means that you don't really own that data in terms of the story that it tells, right? Because you're doing what they told you to do. I always tell leaders of organizations, you want to be able to tell your own story. So as you're identifying your own impact, right? You're defining your own impact, right? You craft your narrative and begin to mine data that tells that story. So you want to absolutely meet the reporting requirements, but also you want to be able to tell your own story with your own data, right? Data is one of those languages that we alluded to when I said you needed to be bilingual. Data is absolutely a language that you need to learn how to speak, because people who give money, they want their impact to be able to be realized in numbers. I gave you numbers and I want numbers back, right? You need to be able to understand that is a real thing, and then learn how to do it well. I always also tell people bad data, like when the data tells a story that says you didn't reach the outcomes that you said you would, that actually is still good because it tells why. If I couldn't do this, tell me why you couldn't do it. Because then if you can explain those gaps, then what you're telling me is you're talking to me about the challenges that you have in meeting the gaps. And sometimes that could lead to more money. That could lead to a new relationship to fill that gap. That could lead to a deeper dive into what's really happening on the ground and what needs to happen in order to make it easier for you to meet those outcomes. So don't shy away from data that looks like you couldn't do what you said. Explain it. If you know the reason. Right? If you needed to house 100 young people and you couldn't because there were only 50 available housing units, it's not that you couldn't house 100 people because you couldn't do it. There wasn't housing inventory available for you to do it. Tell me that. Like, be able to do that. Understand that there is both qualitative and quantitative data. So there's numbers and there's narrative, and be able to use them both, right? That it's a whole language. But absolutely go into your grant agreement, understanding what the reporting requirements are so that you can make sure you can meet the reporting requirements. It's one thing for your data to tell a story about gaps. It's another thing for you not to have the data and your report falls short because you didn't have the capacity to tell me what I needed to know. Those are two very different things. Again, all of this goes back to you knowing your funder, right? Because there are some funders that's hard line and it's hard nosed and they don't really care, right? In the federal spaces, ain't no room for
nobody got time.
Right. You either did it or you didn't.
Right.
Philanthropies might be a little different, right? Because they're place-based, they understand the ecosystem, they understand the challenges. And if you can help them understand even more, then you're looking at a particular issue in a very different way. And now you're even a thought partner because you've taught them something. So you really want to be clear as to what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the very minimum, make sure that you submit your reports on time, right? The things that I was surprised when I submit, and I was responsive to one of my funders, and I was, we got the award information. I was like, oh, thank you so much. It's wonderful. And like, oh, well, thanks for responding. Or, I send in my report ahead of time or on time. And they're like, you'd be surprised at how many people don't submit on time or are not responsive to the program manager who oversees your grant. Don't do that. Yeah. You got to maintain the relationship. That's just like getting married and you stop doing what you did when you don't do that.
Absolutely. Be who you were when we met. When you were wooing me, when we were going to lunch and getting coffee and we were getting acquainted, I need you to be that very same person. And if there's a deadline issue, let me know. Right? Let me know. But again, I'm going to go back to know your funder.
Yes.
Because that may not be true for every funder. And you got to know that too. So you got to know this one I can call and say I need a little more time. This one got to be on time. They don't want to do nothing but the bing of the email that I have no report. So you have to know. Even if they don't know you, you got to know them. Got to know them.
Absolutely. Let's go over to the comment section. I'm gonna go all the way back up when we first started. So Eli says, says great. He's in Baltimore. Hey, be more. Okay. Hey, Eli, thanks for joining us. I hope you're still with us. And Tamika says good morning. Well, good afternoon now. Time is flying, y'all. Time is flying. And Carmen says, hey, Carmen. Hey, CB. Having a target market is very important when seeking funding. You can't get healthcare money from an arts-centered funding program. Right. So know what your areas of focus are. And London, London, you finally made the show. Thank you for joining us, London. Well, she's also she's a branding guru, one of my branding consultants, my coach. So thank you, honey. If it's good to you, that means I'm doing something. Okay. And so Eli also said starting from scratch, a simple idea, guidance is appreciated. Yes. Get you a coach like me. Okay, ShalitaO'Neal.com. Don't be scared. We have a consultation and we can talk about what that looks like. And of course, Carmen captured our hashtag pooling power. Yes. And Viola, hey V, how you doing? Hey, yes, that's my boo.
Our office is
blue. Huh?
Our offices are next to each other.
Oh, awesome. You're so lucky. Look. Well, I mean, we in COVID now, so we can't be in the office.
I ain't seen that a month of Sundays, but
when you do, it's gonna be awesome.
Yes.
Hey, Ella, peace and love. Everyone be blessed. You be blessed too, Ella. Thanks for joining us. And Tamika also said that we are a new nonprofit. When should they apply for a grant, Burgundy?
I would say that is a good question. Do I have an answer? I would say that it never hurts to apply. Like it's like riding a bike. Like you absolutely have to get used to it. I would say though, even before you apply, start introducing yourself to different tables, to different networks, even to different funders. So that you can get an idea of what the landscape is like, what that ecosystem is like, what just that environment is like. And then you can determine your true readiness, right? So it's kind of like you got to get in the pool to figure out if it's cold or not, right? So I would say the same thing. Start associating yourself in circles so you understand who the funders are with their funding, other organizations that have relationships with other funders. I will say that I get more information from existing organizations about new and upcoming organizations or organizations that are already established that aren't on my radar that I need to know from organizations. And so if you got a great network of people that you are associated with and connected with that could get you in other spaces and start introducing you to people, I think that is really, really important. And that'll help you decide when it is that you're ready.
Absolutely. And there are some funders out there who will specifically fund startup organizations. Their return on it, they're not all about return on investments. They're not worried about that. They're truly interested in helping you. But also, like Burgundy said, those people don't tend to broadcast themselves. They tend to be more like private foundations or, individuals. And so having a strong board to help you get connected, and then even in the community, knowing who to talk to is important with that too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, Claire. Sierra. My contacts ain't doing too well. Sierra, she says, hi, everyone. I just joined in, but I've been watching all of your videos for the past 48 hours. Oh, my goodness. I think I'm ready to start my own nonprofit. Thank you for the content. You are very encouraging, Shalita. Oh, thank you, Sierra. You are just a sweetheart. And if you need some support, just reach out to me. Okay. You don't have to do it by yourself. We can talk about how to move things forward. Okay. And of course, look, she bigging us up. Great advice. Thanks, V. And the startup gene, great information. Your 501c3 is pending. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and claim that 501c3 is coming through. Mm-hmm. And then Joseph says, that's great information. I tuned in at the perfect time. Yes, everything in divine timing. Thanks for joining us. And he also said, I just put my board together with that in mind. That is so true. When we're talking about board members and the importance of, making sure you vet them. And then we have LMML. That's the thing about YouTube. You need to put whatever names you're going to. Hey, thanks for joining us. And Christopher says that hit home in a good way. Oh, awesome. There's a lot that we were talking about that. See, this is the type of information that you don't typically get unless you talk to people who have been on the side of funding, who there's the inside piece. Sometimes you have the cookie cutter, this is about how you fundraise. And then you have the real where, okay, are you ready for fundraising? What do your relationships look like when you get the money? What does the financial structure look like? How are you reporting? There's a lot that's in there, not to intimidate you all, but just to make sure you have the right team and the right people in place to support you in the beginning, right? So Eli says, very good information from both of you. My question would be, how can you get your board members to engage more in discussions or ideas without you being the initiator every time? What do you think about that, Burgundy?
I would say sometimes that might be an indicator that maybe those aren't the right people for your board. You have people who are really, really vested, and not just in the organization, but you as leader. I think that you also have to bear that in mind, that structurally you're reporting to that board. You want people who are vested in your development as well. And so sometimes when you get some people who may not be meeting your same energy, you may need to reconsider who it is that you have at the table.
Absolutely. And that should be in your bylaws too. How you handle board members who are not, are not responding or who are not active. Definitely.
I'm glad you said the bylaws, because you have the opportunity to structure that the way that you would like.
Yes, you do.
So board member terms, you really need to think about the length of time that you have a person sitting in a seat before you can kind of rotate them on out. Because you'll find very quickly who's working and who isn't. And you want the opportunity to be able to move them in a very amicable way. And the way to do that is have it in those bylaws. So that rotation, and you have opportunity to switch out what's not working.
Absolutely. And so we've got Facebook user that says, wow, amazing. That's good. Thank you. And then Joy, one of my clients, hey, Joy, she said, this information is priceless.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, and Mercy says, hello, everyone. Hey, Mercy. And Chantel says, great information. Hey, Tel. Look, we all know each other. Look, we all been in the trenches, right?
Years.
And Elizabeth Powell said, well, oh no, this is Miss Marva. Hey, Miss Marva, that's one of my clients too. She said, maybe I need a new board. Now, that's our next process now. After you get your branding, together. Don't you worry, I got your back. Okay, don't worry about that. And they said, this is a great program. I always listen. Good advice. Well, thank you so much. And we have one more question. So can I ask, when should we begin fundraising? So that sort of goes into kind of the grant writing question, but what do you think? I'll let you.
I think if your infrastructure is in place, if your board is in place, if you've done all the legal stuff, if you've got everyone in place, then you can start kind of dipping your toe in the water. And this is very similar to the previous question about, should I go for a grant? I think that you got to get out into the fundraising landscape, the ecosystem, the environment, and feel how you feel in it. Because that's going to really tell you whether or not you're ready, right? When you start kind of networking, learning lingo, getting familiar with who is who and who's doing what. And then you'll have a better sense of the level of readiness. And it'll also expose where you need to kind of shore things up and tweak some. And then you're at a level of readiness where you can go for it.
Awesome. Sorry, that came up from a banner from my about media. I was like, oh no, that's not what I wanted. So we're wrapping up now. Burgundy, thank you so much. I mean, you know how I feel about you and just your wealth of knowledge and giving that so freely to us today. I'm so thankful. Thank you so much.
I'm just grateful for this platform. I feel like, you know, I love us.
Yeah.
We often show up woefully unprepared for what it is that we need, right? And so I just want to leave everyone with, you need to know your power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trust it. And as much heart as you're putting into your work, you need to put as much business acumen in it as well. Because you can love what you do and you can do it with love, and the impact can be just tremendous. But if that doesn't translate into the language of philanthropy, of a contract, you're going to always be experiencing lack.
Yeah.
We want to be full, and we want that abundance that you feel to be inside of the organization so that it itself is thriving. So please, please, please get on your business tip.
Hey, get on the business tip, okay? How can people get in touch with you? If
you can
tell
me. My email is, what is my email? Allison at aecf.org.
Okay.
On Instagram, burgundy_Allison.
Oh,
you can catch me there. But if you have questions, you can certainly email me and I will answer to the best of my ability. And hopefully, you know, I'll see you on this side.
Yeah, so let me put that up there too. Did I just write burgundy_Allison?
Yep.
On IG? Come on, y'all, on IG. Listen, this sister know what she's talking about, okay? And she has a heart of gold, approachable. So, you know, and that's another thing. When people give you their email address,
use it
to reach out, use it. Okay, so wrapping on up. Y'all know who I am, Shalita, the Nonprofitista O'Neill. We've been talking about nonprofit coaching. If you need help with strategic planning, you need help with a fundraising plan, you need help with an event, whatever the case may be, reach out to me to book a 1-hour consultation at shalitao'neill.com, and just go on my website to see all the different things that I offer. I mean, I've got nonprofit visionary toolkits. You say you need a template for some document that you need to use for your nonprofit. I have something I created called the Nonprofit Template Heaven. It's only $37, and I've got over 60 templates in that thing. So go on my website and take a look and see. And also, if you like this, a lot of you said you like this. This was very helpful. Please make sure you like it and subscribe. Make sure you share this with someone else who could benefit from it as well. And let me let y'all know I'm on self-care sabbatical for 2 weeks. So we won't have a hashtag nonprofit no filter discussion next week or the week after. But when we come back on September 1st, next Tuesday, September 1st, we'll be talking about community organizing and community building, right? And how do you raise money for brick and mortar with Sandy Washington, who's the executive director of Lifestyles Maryland. And she is a guru and listen, I'm gonna tell you something about real quick. One of my mentors, and she actually renovated a entire shopping mall, right? That was, or plaza, and turned it into incubator space for nonprofit organizations. And so she's done a lot, you know, as it pertains to that. And so for those of you who are like, I want a building, you know, I want to raise money for it, I don't know, you know, I need some support with it, y'all need to tune in with us September 1st. All right. Until then, be real, have fun, and get results.